Hello, my dear students. Right in front of your screen, you can see the chapter number 6, Weathering the Storm in Ersama. Yes, we are going to read today this chapter, Weathering the Storm in Ersama. Weathering means facing the storm in Ersama. This story gives an account of the storm that hit the coastal town of Ersama in Odisha state in the year 1999. Thousands of people were killed and hundreds of houses were destroyed when a powerful cyclone hit Orissa in October 1999. Thus, the story is about a young man named Prashant who had gone Irsama, a small town, to visit one of his friends. Stuck at that place for 2 dreadful nights, Prashant decided to go to his village but found destruction everywhere. Then we learn how he gathered some young people of his village and started helping the poor and the needy. This is the story of Prashant's courage in the face of a great calamity. So, the details of how he worked hard to help the villagers overcome the devastation caused by the storm inspire us to have courage and a positive approach towards life. So, let us read the chapter. The cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999. Orissa, and now the current name is Odisha. The state is now known as Odisha. Previously, it was known as Orissa. So it was the year 1999, the month October, killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. So for 2 dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. He was stuck there and stranded on the roof of the house. On the third day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? Let's read the chapter and find the answer. On 27th October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small village town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. In the evening, a dark and menacing storm quickly gathered. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. So, Prashant, he was the native of a village in the coastal state of Odisha, and it was on 27th October. He was on a visit to a friend in Ersama, and Ersama, it is a small town in Odisha. It is a block headquarter in Jagatpura district. So his village was at a distance of 18 kilometers from Ersama. So he had lost his mother, and 7 years ago, and that day, so he went to meet his friend after 7 years of his mother's death. And that day, a strong storm gathered in the evening. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. So the furious wind, accompanied by continuous rain, it lashed the place everywhere. Heavy and incessant rain. Incessant means continuous rain. And the fury here refers to how furious the storm was. So incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient refers to old trees, were uprooted and crashed to the earth. So you can see the wind speed, it was so much that the trees were uprooted and they just broke and fell to the earth. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house neck deep. So, because of continuous rain, there was flood also. So, a strong storm gathered in the evening. Furious winds were accompanied by continuous rains. and screams of people could be heard as trees got uprooted, and those uprooted trees fell on the houses and destroys the houses as they fell on them. Water flowed with gush and swept away the houses that came in its way. So the angry water, it was flood everywhere. Water was everywhere there, and water, it was filled in the houses of the people. The depths of the water, it was neck deep. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation. And of the wind's velocity of 350 kilometer per hour. So the wind speed is mentioned here with the velocity of 350 kilometer per hour. But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roofs and walls. So see, there was neck deep water in his friend's house, and as his house was a pakka house, it was built of cement and mortar. It was able to resist the strong winds which blew at a speed of 350 kilometers per hour. But the family was terrorized because in the middle of the night, trees had fallen on the house, damaging the roof and walls of the building. So the family was terrified as the uprooted trees fell upon their house. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. The crazed destruction means the mad destruction, the fury of wind that was there. Wrought by the cyclone means brought by the cyclone, formed by the cyclone. The surge of the ocean, the waves of the ocean continued for the next 36 hours. Although wind speeds had reduced and somewhat by the next morning, to escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his family had taken refuge on the roof. So everything was destroyed there at that time, and Prashant and his family, they were forced to take shelter on the roof because the water was neck deep. Everywhere water could be seen. And to escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his family had taken refuge on the roof. Refuge means taking shelter on the roof. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at the first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. So when Prashant saw the destruction in the morning light, then he was actually terrified. He was in a great shock, and the scene that he would never forget. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eye could see. So everywhere there was water, the brown water carrying mud and silt and everything. It had covered the whole land, and only water could be seen everywhere, wherever the eye could go. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. Fractured here means broken houses. Bloated animal carcasses and human corpses floated in every direction. Bloated animal carcasses means the dead body of the animal. Bloated means swollen. And the dead bodies of the animal and human bodies, dead bodies, corpses means dead body of human being. It could be seen floating on the water everywhere. All round, even huge old trees had fallen. Two coconut trees had fallen on the roof of the house, and thus this was a blessing in disguise. Blessing in disguise means a kind of, you can say, a good thing which has happened in this situation of misfortune. So it was blessing in disguise. In that worst situation, they could find those tender coconuts because they were trapped. The family which was trapped on the roof, they were actually surviving on those coconuts. So this was a blessing in disguise because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving. Kept the family means it protected the family from being starved in the several days that followed. So they survived on those coconut because though the two coconut trees had fallen on their roof, so they were able to manage during these times with the help of those coconut trees. For the next 2 days, Prashant sat huddled with his friends' family in the open rooftop. Huddled means sitting close to each other. They were sitting closely together on the roof. So for next 2 days, they were trapped on the roof. They sat together, sitting close to each other. The whole family just waited. They froze in cold and incessant rays. The rain did not stop. It was continuously raining, and they were actually freezing in the cold weather. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tear. Prashant, he was in a state of shock. He was crying, and the rainwaters actually washed away all his tears. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? Bereaved means separating, getting separated from some near and dear ones, suffering the loss of losing someone, which means bereaved. So Prashant's mind was filled with this thought whether he would see his family again or not, whether they survived this storm or not, and he was just waiting for the rain to stop. And thus his mind was occupied with the thought that was he going to get separated from his family forever. 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, the rain ceased, and the rainwater slowly began to recede. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. To seek out his family means to look for his family without any delay. So when after 2 days, when water began to recede, means the water level when began to decrease, then Prashant, he decided that he would go and look for his family. He was determined, but the situation was still dangerous, and his friends, his family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. But Prashant knew he had to go. So Prashant, uh, when the rain stopped, he could not wait any longer. And this shows that how it was difficult for him to pass the time as he was worried about his family's well-being. And as the rain had stopped and the water was receding gradually, although it was still dangerous for him to go out, he did not want to waste any more time because he wanted to look for his family. Prashant's friends' family, they requested him to stay back, but he left. He equipped himself with a long, sturdy stick. Long, sturdy means a long, strong stick, and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village. Expedition means the journey back to his village. So, with the help of a long, strong stick, Prashant, he started his journey towards his home. So, it was a journey he would never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road to determine where the water was most shallow. So now he had equipped himself, means he armed himself. He took a strong stick and then he started his 18-kilometer journey way back through the swollen flood water, means the increased level of water, the water level that was there. He started walking through those waters, and the journey he would never forget. Obviously, the sights and scenes that he saw, he would never forget those. He constantly had to use a stick. So he, with the help of that stick, as you can see in the picture, the water, still waist deep water is there. So he used a stick to locate the road, and thus he started walking. The water was still shallow. At places, it was very steep and progress was very slow. So, if you could not locate, when you walk in the streets which you don't know, which you're not familiar with, it is difficult for you to walk. Similar was the condition with Prashant. And even the flood water destroys the roads. You cannot locate where the land is and where it is not. So at several points, he lost the road and had to swim. So where he could not swim across, walk across, he decided to swim through that. And after some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. So as Prashant moved further, he saw two men walking on the road and he was glad to see them. The pressure was relieved as he saw that they were his uncle's friend who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. As they waded through the water, waded means to walk through the water, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. Macabre means horrifying, terrifying. They had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. So, walking through the water was not an easy one. They came across the dead bodies of people, including men, women, children, even the dead bodies of the animal, the carcasses of the animals. It was really difficult for them because they had to move those dead bodies and walk through them. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. So, from wherever they crossed, they found everything was destroyed. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Catastrophe refers to the tragedy, the natural tragedy caused. So Prashant, fear actually grew more and he started weeping loudly, crying loudly. He was sure that his family members would not have survived this disaster. Eventually, Prashant reached his village, Kalikuda. So the name of Prashant's village is Kalikuda. His heart went cold. Heart went cold means he could feel the chill in his heart. He became numb. He became very his heart went cold means becoming numb. जैसे कहते हैं डर से एकदम कांप उठना. That way he became numb on seeing the remnants of the house, of the roof. So where their home once stood, there were only remnants of the roof. Remnants means the remaining parts of the roof. So when he reached his village, Kalikuda, he saw that his house was completely destroyed. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted. Mangled means broken, twisted means bent, and in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So when he saw his house, he saw that their belongings were scattered in the water. Some things hung on the branches of the trees just above the flood water. He decided to look for his family and he decided to go to the shelter which was set up by the Red Cross Society. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandfather. Maternal means from his mother's side, that means mother's grandmother, sorry, mother's mother. So, Nani jisko kehte hain. So, among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. Weak with hunger, she rushed to him, her hands outstretched, her eyes brimming. Brimming means filled with tears. Yes, it was a miracle. They had long given him up for dead. So as Prashant, he reached there, he saw his family from the people, from the crowd, that among the crowd he could identify his maternal grandmother there. She appeared to be very weak, but he was glad to see that she was alive. She rushed to him with her arms open, अपनी बाहें फैलाकर. Grandmother, she rushed towards Prashant. Her eyes were full of tears. And it was miracle for her as the family had thought that Prashant would not have survived the storm. Quickly word spread and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. So extended family means all the siblings, the cousins, uncles and aunt, everyone. The news spread there quickly that Prashant was alive and the family came to know that he had come there and he was all right. So they all gathered there. Prashant anxiously scanned the battered group. Motley battered group means of different kind of people, those who gathered there. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunt, they all seemed to be there. So he found that all the members of the family, they were present there, and they all were worried about him, but they all were relaxed to see that Prashant was all right. By the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. Now, the next morning came, and Prashant, he looked at the situation. The desperate means the hopeless situation that was there. And he decided to get a grip over himself, to get hold over himself. When Prashant, he realized that people were actually, they were just getting buried in the deep grief. They all were uh, just gripped into the grief, and he saw that he must get hold over himself first. He sensed a deathly grief settling upon 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. So the people, the 2,500 people, those who were there in the shelter, they all were full of sadness as they had lost everything in the storm. All the 96 houses had been washed away, and it was their fourth day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. Tumult means uproar of disorderly crowd force. So the number of people, those were present there, it was not sufficient for them to just survive over the raw coconuts. They had been eating raw coconut from several days, but now those were insufficient. And thus, it was important that something should be done. So Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village. Now, see the courage here, Prashant. He did not give up in the situation. He was just at the age of 19, and he decided that something should be done. And he came up as a leader to lead the crowd of distraught villagers. जो villagers दुख में डूबे हुए थे, those who were broken, those who were shattered, he decided to help them if no one else did. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. So first thing that he did, that was he planned, he gathered people, he formed a group of villagers, including the elders and the youth, and they planned to force the local merchant to give them the stock of grains and rice to feed the people. So, to pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. This time, the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly. Triumphantly means victoriously. So, the group of people, those who went to persuade and convince the merchant to part with his rice, they succeeded, and thus they swam through the floods to get food for the crowd. No one cared what the rice was already, no one cared that the rice was already rotting. So, no one cared that the rice was already rotting. Branches from fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. No one bothered whether the rice was rotting, whether it was destroyed, because they were starving, and thus they gathered branches, the broken branches of trees, to kindle a fire. As they were wet, burning a fire was an we can say arduous task, a difficult task. But they cooked rice. So reluctant and slow fire means as the wood was wet, as it was not burning properly. So reluctant fire. Still, they managed to kindle the fire and they cooked rice. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. And thus, after a long time, they were able to have a meal, eat a meal after 4 days. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of the filth, urine, vomit, and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. So, the second task that the group was given to clean, it was to clean the shelter. So filth here refers to dirt, and thus they organized the group, and then this second task was given them to clean the shelter. They removed the garbage, cleaned the excretory waste that was there, cleaned the dead bodies from the area, and they also tended the injured. They also attended and tried to treat the wounded people, and thus this was the second task which was done by Prashant. Now, dear students, we will stop here and we will continue the chapter in the next class. So, read the chapter up to this part again. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.